item B with item A. We have a guest with us this evening, Danny Rivas, who's our code compliance manager, and he's going to be joining us for that item B.
Sure. Unless my commissioner, any commissioners object, we'll amend the agenda. But Danny has to spend the entire evening with us.
No objection.
And I'm trying new lighting tonight. We'll see how this works out. It's all about the lighting. Here we go. So it's 7 o'clock. Let's go ahead and call this meeting of the City of West Hollywood Rent Stabilization Commission to order at 7 p.m. on, where are we, December the 10th. You'll join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Secretary, can we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Charity?
Here.
Commissioner Kirby's?
Here.
Commissioner Maggio?
Present.
Commissioner Martz?
Here.
Commissioner O'Keefe?
Here.
Vice Chair Topshin?
Here.
Chair Bergstein?
Present. We have a quorum. We've just discussed a change in item 4 for our agenda, moving item 10B prior to 10A. So with that amendment to the agenda, I'll entertain a motion to approve as amended.
Make a motion to amend with the amendment.
Second.
And I'll.
Okay. Can we have a roll call vote on approval of the agenda, please?
Commissioner Charity?
Aye.
Commissioner Kirby's?
Aye.
Commissioner Maggio?
Aye.
Commissioner Martz?
Aye.
Commissioner O'Keefe?
Aye.
Vice Chair Topshin?
Aye.
Chair Bergstein?
Aye, we approve the agenda. Moving on to item 5, the approval of our minutes from the November 12th, 2020 commission meeting. Have we all had a chance to review the minutes? Do you have any corrections or changes? If not, I'll entertain a motion to accept as submitted.
I will make the motion to accept the minutes as submitted.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes from November 12th, 2020. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Charity?
Aye.
Commissioner Kirby's?
Aye.
Commissioner Maggio?
Aye.
Commissioner Martz?
Aye.
Commissioner O'Keefe?
Aye.
Vice Chair Topshin?
Aye.
Chair Bergstein?
Aye, the minutes have been approved. Mr. Secretary, do we have any public speakers with us this evening?
Not at this time.
Okay, thank you. Going on to item 7, manager report, Mr. Noonan.
With pleasure. Thank you, Chair, members of the Commission. First of all, I'd like to review your look-ahead calendar, which is on page 7 of your packet. This is the last meeting of this calendar year. And this evening, we do have 2 items for discussion and then a conversation about the election of the chair. So we have flipped those 2 items as the Commission adopted the agenda. So we'll take the broken elevators discussion first, which will be Commission-led, and then an item on information on the rent stabilization ordinance deposit interest formula. This is for secure deposits. And looking ahead at 2021, your first meeting will be January 14th, and that meeting does have 2 appeals scheduled for it at this time. And then January 28th has 1 appeal scheduled, and on that evening, we also are planning to provide some information on subletting under the RSO. We will move that down, though, if we do have another appeal scheduled. So that concludes the review of the look-ahead calendar at this time. The chair had asked me to provide some information that I provided to the council this Monday regarding a renter survey that we recently did. And so I'm going to just provide a couple of slides for the commission's information. These were, I wasn't able to provide the slides at the meeting because the meeting had a lot of items on it. However, I thought that it is interesting information, and I'm glad that the chair wanted to hear a little bit about the survey that we had just completed. In October, we contracted with Fairbank, Maisland, Mullen, Metz, and Associates FM3 to conduct a survey of renters and landlords for the purpose of estimating renters' ability to pay rent during this time in the pandemic, and then to evaluate past and ongoing needs for rental assistance. The outcome of the renter survey was statistically accurate to 5% of error in the full sample, and then about 7% in a half sample. We did talk to landlords as well, though we didn't get enough landlords in order for that survey to be statistically accurate. And so we have been able to use it for informational purposes. The outcomes of the survey, about 40% of renter households reported that they had met the criteria for the eviction moratorium definition, and that they'd been laid off, furloughed, or had lost hours from COVID-19, and or had stayed at home on recommendation, and that had impacted their work. When we look at this in our housing stock, and specifically to the rent stabilization stock, of course, we have, HUD tells us that we have about a little over 22,000 households in the city, 22,600 households. And by far and large, these are renter households, 17,780 households on HUD's reporting are renters here. 80% of that, 72% are in rent stabilized housing. So from the survey itself, households did report, almost 90% of households reported that they were able to make all rent payments. Again, 40% had reported that they had been impacted by COVID-19. Since April, 9% had reported that they were not able to pay all rent. And this ranged from 1 month that they couldn't pay to 3 to 4 to up to the entire time. So in context, we provided that that's about 1,600 households have had struggles paying rent. Impact of assistance, 20% of respondents had indicated that they had asked or applied for assistance, and 60% of that had been from friends or family. So a large part of assistance is coming from friends or family. About 30% had also applied to the City of West Hollywood partner agencies for assistance. So another large amount of contribution from the city in support. 50% reported that they received assistance, and about 40% were still receiving assistance of that 50% that received assistance. Another important outcome was that 50% of respondents did say that they remained concerned over whether they'd be able to pay rent in the next 6 months and the next year. So from the landlord survey, again, this is informational, it's not statistically accurate. But we did, and to give you some context, 54% of the people responding owned one building in the city. 71% of those buildings are 10 or fewer units. So these are small size buildings, one owners, and 70% were individual or family owned. In this responses, about 20% reported that they had received payments from someone on behalf of a tenant. And so this indicates, the rental assistance that we're providing to tenants is trickling down and helping landlords as well. I thought it was an interesting point to mention. 22% reported that they had lowered or forgave rent. 11% had set up repayment plans, and 24% had borrowed money to pay bills. So that concludes the information that I wanted to share this evening. And I turn it back over to you, Chair.
Thank you, Peter. Can you toggle up 2 slides? I just had a question. On that slide, the impact of rental assistance. So go 1 slide down, sorry. Just to clarify those numbers, so 20% responded they had asked for or applied for assistance, and the next number, the 60%, so is that 60% of the 20% had asked friends, or is it additional 60% of our population had asked?
No, that's 60% of the 20%.
That's what I thought, just wanted to clarify.
You're welcome.
Thank you. So commissioners have any questions for Mr. Noonan on this report? Well, thank you so much for sharing this information with us.
You're very welcome.
Commissioners, do you have any questions in general for Mr. Noonan at this point? Okay. With that, we'll go on to item 8, commission comments. Commissioners, do you have any comments at this time? Going on item 9, we have no appeals this evening. Going on to item 10, new business. We're going to start with 10B, which is the broken elevators discussion. And Mr. Noonan and perhaps Mr. Rivas will be handling this jointly, I believe.
Yeah, I think I'll set us up, and then Chair, I will turn it back over to you and possibly Commissioner O'Keefe, who I believe is the commissioner who had asked for this discussion. So this is a commission-led discussion of broken elevators. I believe that this came about last year after the commission had received at least 1 or 2 different items that had involved a broken elevator and relevant and related rent reductions. And I believe one of the cases may have come back on appeal on a couple of different occasions. And so I know that it's been a while since this the request. I apologize for that, but we do have it now before you. That's essentially all that I was going to say to tee this up. So but to mention that we do have Danny Rivas with us, Code Compliance Manager, and then also Allison Regan, our legal counsel, will participate in the conversation. And I turn it back over to you, Chair.
Commissioner O'Keefe, since this was an item that you brought forward, would you like to begin the discussion with any questions? Then we can open it up in general for the rest of the commission to chime in.
Sure. So I was just hoping to hear from Mr. Rivas, maybe Ms. Regan, about what remedies are already available and could potentially be available to ensure that elevators are fixed in a timely fashion. You know, we've had a few cases. One was on the news where residents, including disabled residents, were not able to rely on their elevator for many, many, many months at a time. And that can lead to people being homebound. It can lead to people being in excruciating pain as they go up and down stairs. And I know in our city, we have an ordinance that in addition to being able to reduce one's rent, if a parking space is taken away, there can be civil and injunctive penalties that the city can pursue in addition to criminal penalties against a landlord. So I was wondering if that's something that's also available for elevators. And then finally, if historic preservation, I think some of the cases we've heard involved historic buildings. And I'm wondering to what extent, if at all, that slows down the process. And if there's a possibility of waiving that, if there's ever a tension between aesthetics and functionality and making sure that disabled people can get up and down. So I'd love to hear from Mr. Rivas about what's in place in the code compliance side, and hear maybe from Ms. Regan if more could be done at the city level to ensure that people are not stuck in their homes or faced to be in excruciating pain to get in and out, up and down stairs instead of taking a reliable elevator.
So Allison, maybe I'll jump in and maybe just cover over, and then if I'm missing anything, please add to that. So good evening, Chair and Rent Stabilization Commissioners. I'm Danny Rivas, Code Compliance Manager with the City of West Hollywood. So in terms of what available options there are, if folks are experiencing an elevator that is not currently operating, then they can contact our Code Compliance Division. Our Code Compliance Division is operating 7 days a week. We are operating from 7 a.m. to 12 a.m. Monday through Wednesday, and then Thursday through Sunday, we're 7 a.m. to 3 a.m. And so we do have staff that will respond quickly when we do receive these types of calls, understanding that there are certainly tenants that reside in these buildings that may have some difficulties or disabilities in terms that would prevent them from accessing a staircase of something of that sort, right? So we definitely want to make sure that our code enforcement officers in the Code Compliance Division get out there, inspect these elevators. If they are not functioning correctly, then our standard practice is we will notify the property management company or the landlord with a warning notice, giving them ample time to start that process in terms of making the repairs. Typically, we will give folks 72 hours to start that process. If they begin communicating, which typically they do, we will then grant additional time depending on when that technician gets out there to assess what the situation is. Many times elevators, especially in the older buildings that we have in West Hollywood, they do take some time in terms of making repairs, but we certainly want to get them moving and get them motivated. So if they do not, for whatever reason, contact us back within a reasonable amount of time, then we will move forward in terms of issuing an administrative citation. In addition to receiving our requests, we also will forward that information over to Cal OSHA. It's a State Department of Industrial Relations, and they do have an elevator unit that's specific to going out and performing inspections as well. And they're also the folks in the team that actually inspect elevators throughout the County of Los Angeles, in this region, on units with 3 or more units in multifamily dwellings. So they will come out, do an inspection, and at the same time issue the same type of notice, but in more detail in terms of what they're finding, if there's something specific that they identify. So we will work hand in hand with them in terms of doing that. And most of the cases that we have, and there haven't been very many, in looking at the database and having my staff kind of pull that, I was asking in anticipation of this meeting just to see if we had information that we can quickly pull. And we don't have a specific category for broken elevators. However, we were kind of familiar with some of the properties that we know some residents have brought to our attention in the past that have been taken care of. So for the most part, our administrative process that I outlined, giving that warning notice, if needed, issuing an administrative citation is available. And those are tools that would allow us to gain compliance. If we do come across a situation where our administrative citations still do not provide us the ability to get the elevators functioning, then at that point, that's something that we would work with legal services, the staff attorneys, Allison or Jonathan Holub, in terms of working on taking a different approach, a legal approach in terms of any sort of civil injunction, as you mentioned, Commissioner O'Keefe. And even in fact, in our municipal code, once we've issued an administrative citation, we could also pursue a criminal complaint as well through the courts as well. So those are our available options, and they have proven to be effective, but it's a matter of us just learning of the information as soon as possible so that we can get somebody out there to start that communication.
Thank you.
Ms. Regan, did you have anything you'd like to add at this point?
No, I think Mr. Rivas covered everything. I think the one thing I would add is that if we get information that a landlord is doing this deliberately to affect some type of a constructive eviction, we also have the tenant harassment provisions in our ordinance. So that's something we could pursue as well.
I think I have 2 questions. The first one, Danny, would be for you. I know a project this commission undertook a couple of years ago with Commissioner Charity was routine inspections of our rent stabilized housing. And I'm pretty sure that our current Mayor Pro Tem did put forward and I think passed inspections of common areas and exteriors of buildings. If that is in place, would it be possible to add in as part of that routine inspection of a common area of buildings to make sure that elevators are indeed in good working order when they do that routine inspection?
Yeah, great question, Chair. And absolutely, you're correct. Our mayor and even Councilmember Meister had directed staff to look into a pilot program related to proactive residential code compliance program. But it did take some time for us to start analyzing that, assessing and evaluating our current resources, our code enforcement staff, and then the pandemic came. And so we've certainly been concentrating and trying to deal with a lot of the health order enforcement and construction sites and everything else that we have going on right now. So we have placed a pause, or pushed a pause, I should say, on that directive in the interim. But it's definitely something that we could look at in terms of incorporating while we're doing our proactive inspections. And for those who maybe are unaware of that, and so the idea is to proactively and systematically have code enforcement staff go out, do inspections in the common areas of multifamily dwellings that would cover rent stabilized buildings. And then in addition to that, while staff is on site, if a tenant felt comfortable with requesting that a code enforcement officer perform an inspection within the interior of the unit, then the code enforcement officer would do so at that time, but only at the request of the tenant. And so, you know, really kind of evaluating, again, kind of assessing really the unknowns. We don't know how much of a workload, added workload, that is going to add. And I can definitely say that we do not have the capacity at this time to provide any sort of proactive inspection program, but we were looking at that, and then COVID-19 hit.
Pandemic certainly has changed the parameters, but appreciate you keeping that on your radar. And then I think a question maybe for Ms. Regan. My question is, you know, I consider myself a rather youthful senior citizen with some mobility issues. And certainly if I lived on a building where I was not on the first floor and the elevator was out of order, that would create significant issues for my daily life. Are there any circumstances where if an elevator is indeed out of order for an extended time, whether that's because, as Mr. Rivas said, sometimes they're older units, it takes longer to get the parts and repair them, or through negligence or whatever, the landlord, could a landlord be required to temporarily relocate a tenant, to a hotel or some building where they have elevator access until that repair was completed?
That's something that I would have to look into a little bit. What the ordinance specifies is if the unit itself is somehow rendered uninhabitable, or if the landlord has to take possession of the unit, that triggers an obligation of the landlord to relocate the tenant. There is a provision that says that if the property owner, as a result of an official, you know, a red tag or something by a city official. So it is possible that if a city official has red tagged the elevator or has otherwise cited for it, that might be a provision that we could use to argue that in that case, if there are tenants with mobility issues, that they should be relocated. We have not used it in that way, but I think that's worth exploring.
Mr. Rivas, is that something that your department would sort of red tag, or would that be I think Cal OSHA, I think it was the State Department, who might be responsible if it rose to that level for issuing that type of a violation citation?
Yeah, so it would definitely be Cal OSHA and the elevator unit that I'd mentioned that would be coming out and would apply any sort of tag on the elevator unit. It wouldn't be our code enforcement staff. But again, just working closely with them, if they did identify any sort of violations with the elevator that rose to the extent where they did issue it a tag, and the tag that they would issue would essentially shut down the operation until all the repairs had been made and then a reinspection occurred. So if that did happen, then we would simply reiterate that based off of the report that they provide us.
Mr. Maggio? You need to unmute yourself, sir. There you go. Nope.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Obviously, there's no easy solution to maintenance of elevators, and we think they're only for directed to old buildings, but new buildings seem to have more problems, specifically the Dillon, the Domain, the Avalon, which are all very new buildings. Their elevators break down regularly. And part of the problem is that they're not an Otis, they're a Krups. And when you need parts, you have to send to Germany for them. So often an elevator can be out a week. In this particular building, it's been up to 5 weeks. And I know that some of the elderly and handicapped had to go to hotels for a duration and are not compensated. So I think, it's not an easy solution no matter where you have an elevator, but especially in these newer buildings where there really is major problems with the elevators.
So you said that you've known tenants who have had to temporarily relocate and they were not reimbursed by the property manager. Commissioner Martz?
The
I just have a
question
few
is to
comments.
Danny, Chair, if he had any comments in regard to that. Is he gone?
No, he's
No, Commissioner, I'm here. I don't, and I think that's something that I would defer to legal services and Allison on in terms of what options are available in terms of a tenant, recovering any sort of costs associated. That's not something that code compliance would be able to assist with. However, I mean, if something is occurring where an elevator is not operational for 5 weeks, we definitely want to know about that as soon as possible, kind of going back to that, where folks reporting it directly to us so we can get somebody out there in a timely manner and start that administrative process with them. And I think Allison commented on, what options somebody could pursue in terms of that, but I would have to defer to legal services on that.
But that's the point. If you can't get the parts, how can you rectify the situation quickly? You just can't.
Right. And so from a code compliance perspective, as long as they were demonstrating to us that they were pursuing so and were making every effort, then from a code enforcement perspective, we would allow them that time. To your point, we wouldn't begin that citation process or pursuing any sort of elevated legal action in terms of that. But in terms of tenants recovering costs or attempting to do so, that wouldn't be something that our division would assist with.
Commissioner Martz?
Yes, I just wanted to echo Ms. Regan's hesitancy to answer the question about whether there's compensation due from an elevator. I had the same kind of brain quandary about a unit being uninhabitable. Clearly would qualify someone for relocation, covering a hotel, whatnot, but whether the elevator does is a different question. My personal opinion is it should, and I'm sure, the law has lots of gray areas, and I would, if I was representing a tenant, make that argument. And I have made those in the past for my clients. And I'm not sure exactly the reason Commissioner O'Keefe put this on our agenda. I think it's because we've seen this a number of times, and it's a little concerning to see these tenants, especially elderly or with mobility issues, unable to get to their units. And it's not the typical case where the gardener didn't come, and I think you'll survive that for a while. But when you don't have the access to your unit, and some of these stories are very disheartening, that they just sit in their apartments or someone has to deliver groceries to them, that's a quality of life issue. And I think it behooves code compliance and legal counsel and eventually city council to, and I know Vice Chair Topshin has talked about this a lot, is reevaluate our reductions that we give for certain items. And I think that an elevator may need to be quadrupled, or really put a penalty onto landlords if they are providing a reduction services that affects quality of life, as opposed to gardening or some of the more simple things of life. And so that would be my comment, is just that we may need to reevaluate which things have more value. And it's a quality of life issue to me that elevators, you know, don't work. And we've seen some landlords who just don't care. And if you're being penalized a $20, $50 a month in a 12-unit building, you could probably weather that and not care. But if it's $200, $300 per unit, you might care a little bit more to get these parts and get these things done. And I do emphasize on the fact that elevators are only made by a certain number of companies, but at the end of the day, the tenants' rights to get up and down their buildings is, to me, more important than where these parts are coming from. So those are my comments on that.
Commissioner Kerpes.
I just had a couple of questions. Do we know, so I'm assuming that some buildings are required to have elevators and some, you know, it's optional, like maybe a 2-story building, they just chose to put an elevator in. Does anyone know what buildings are required, what the trigger is when elevators are required in a building? If not, that's all right. I'm just curious. You know, okay. And then my other
Commissioner Kerpes, I've heard from developers that elevators are not required in the building code of California.
Oh, so they could be like a 10-story building and it wouldn't be necessarily required?
It's something that we need to report, that we need to look into. I don't have that conclusively, but it is that I have the questions come up on that point from developers to say, we don't believe that elevators are even required. So let us get back to you with that, to the commission.
That's all right. I was just curious for this conversation. Then the other question I had, we may or may not know the answer to, is has anyone seen in leases or is there ever, you know, comments or lines in leases that say, you know, you can't hold the property owner liable, or are those even allowed if they were in a lease? Not necessarily for our rent stabilization ordinance, but just in general.
I wonder if legal
I was
counsel.
going to say, oh, sorry.
I won't answer 100%, but what that sounds like is anything in a contract that is illegal is void. And I'm pretty sure that somewhere there is a state law or a city law that would run afoul of, and it would just be stricken out. I don't have a perfect answer, but it doesn't sound right to me.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know for sure. I would assume that in West Hollywood with our rent stabilization ordinance, it would cancel out or it would be voided. I just was curious if they even exist. Thank you.
Vice Chair Topchin.
Thank you, Chair. I have a couple of questions. This is for Inspector Rivas. Well, clearly the elevator service is an essential housing service in the building that there is an elevator. Can you tell me if there are any requirements in terms of the posting inside the elevator? What type of information is required to be posted?
And assuming, Vice Chair, you're referring to in terms of posting inspection or annual inspection for the certificate based off of Cal OSHA's inspection?
Inspections and also contact information for the tenants or for anyone who is using the elevator. What would be required under the current code?
So we currently don't have anything in the West Hollywood Municipal Code that requires any sort of posting other than what's required by Cal OSHA as a part of their elevator unit. So when they do perform their annual inspections or routine inspections, then there is a certificate in each of the elevators. You may see them or are familiar with them that essentially just outlines when the last inspection occurred, when the next inspection is anticipated, and then it does provide the contact information for the Cal OSHA elevator unit on it.
So that there wouldn't be any information, any contact information for the city, for the code enforcement?
There would not, no.
Okay. And Inspector, do you know how many buildings we have in the city currently that would have elevators in it?
Great question, but no, I don't know that information off the top of my head.
Okay. Thank you. Well, we really have a good a rent reduction mechanism for the cases where the elevator service is not available. And I agree with Commissioner Martz mentioned that this maybe we can revisit this guidelines to see if the amount for rent reduction can be increased for those cases when the elevator is not available, because I can't even imagine how important it is to have an elevator in a let's say in a 4 or 3 even story building when there are elderly people live there or people with disabilities. So it's not even an inconvenience. We're talking about an important essential functioning. So yeah, thank you, Commissioner O'Keefe, for bringing this for our discussion. And I think although there is a mechanism for rent reduction, and as Inspector Rivas explained, there is also the avenue for the code enforcement to issue citation, and for the severe cases even to bring legal action against those landlords who do not comply and not proactively fixing or addressing those issues. I don't know if there's anything else we can come up with to make this more effective for the residents, for the tenants, to ensure that if there is an elevator in the building, that should be functioning. So I will definitely support any proposed idea. I definitely see that we should come up with some sort of a solution, maybe to make it more make landlords more responsible for that. Maybe it would be more proactive to find out how many buildings with elevators we have in the city. That's the first thing. And then to see if we can come up with a mechanism to inspect routinely or provide some sort of a mechanism for the tenants to file complaints quickly, for the tenants to be aware where to call, when to call, if they're in the elevator and if it breaks down. So then they should have the city's phone number, the code enforcement phone number, to be able to call, at least to leave a message or something like that. So thank you.
I haven't heard from Commissioner Charity yet. Would you like to add some comments?
Yes, I just want to thank Commissioner O'Keefe for bringing up this topic, and thank you, Chair, for also remembering the systematic code enforcement program and adding the elevator talk into the inspection of the common areas if and when and should that come up. The only thing that hasn't been said yet is we had a case in the past about an elevator that was constantly under repair over and over. And what I had gathered from that case is possibly an issue of landlords trying to avoid the expense of putting in a brand new elevator, and you're having, an elevator that is constantly in need of repair over and over again, and they, are fixing it up and putting it together again and again when it should be completely replaced. And I just wanted to point that to Danny and see if he had seen any of those issues before, and if we have any mechanisms, or is that something we could include in the future for maybe some of these repeat offender situations where we have a constantly broken elevator that should be completely replaced.
Thank you, Commissioner, and great question as well. So in terms of how we address those types of repeat situations, I mean, really the goal of our code compliance program is to gain voluntary compliance. And so when we're dealing with those situations, we would go through the same administrative process that I outlined, right? Providing a warning notice, giving them ample time. And so in those situations, if they did make the repair and it was functional and in operation, then we would essentially close out our case. So we wouldn't pick up where we left off and maybe, overstep some of that administrative process and go maybe straight to an administrative citation, right? If we came back out there, traditionally that's not our standard practice, especially when it comes to elevator units. And in the code, there's nothing that provides us the ability to say, okay, after 2 or 3 instances within a certain period of time, that would then warrant us to order them to install a completely new elevator as opposed to making a repair.
So maybe something for future discussion, commissioners, if we saw those in the future, to add to Commissioner Martz's discussion about revision of the penalties for these being down, the loss of the housing service.
Commissioner Kerpes?
Yeah, to kind of go more in detail on that, that's my biggest issue too with elevators. Well, all reduction in housing services really is that the tenant usually has to wait 30 days, has to request the repair and wait 30 days for the repair to happen. Elevators are much different than, as someone mentioned earlier, different than another housing service that, you know, you can live a little longer without the gardener coming, to where maybe if the commission wants to kind of ask staff to look into the possibility of some form of either reduce on the issue of elevators, reducing the amount of time that a tenant must wait to file for a rent reduction hearing, or even, and I just want to, when they think about that, or when they look at those opportunities, that we don't tie it necessarily to code enforcement, because there's always a code enforcement side issue or side of things, and then there's the reduction in housing service. And while a violation of a code enforcement or a violation of one of the codes often leads to a reduction in housing service, a reduction in housing service doesn't necessarily mean there's a code violation. So I think that there's a lot of times when maybe in that case that someone mentioned earlier, I think Commissioner Charity had mentioned, where it was kind of repeatedly under maintenance, that maybe staff look into a time, like after so many times of that, you know, whether it be within 10 days or 30 days, 45 days, whatever, but within a certain time period, if just that happens too often, then tenants can apply for a rent reduction to kind of compensate for that.
Ms. Regan.
I just want to caution the commission as far as using the rent reduction process as a punitive means. Remember that the rent adjustment hearing process is only to balance out the rent that the tenant is paying versus the housing services they're receiving. It's specifically not designed to be punitive, because as a quasi-judicial process, the hearing examiner constitutionally just does not have that authority. So the amount that we reduce the rent has to be tied to the value of that housing service as a function of the rent that's being paid. So my suggestion would be, and again, I think when we're talking about something like a broken elevator, I think it's something that we have to take on a case-by-case basis. So if it genuinely impacts, if it's a life safety issue, then we need to treat that. That's not something that the rent adjustment process is going to be able to take care of, because just for what Commissioner Kerpes described, we have a very deliberate process so that each party has an opportunity to submit evidence, and so that the hearing examiner can do their job. But if this is something that's a life safety issue, then we're going to have to treat that differently. And so whether it's bringing in code compliance or CalOSHA, or utilizing the tools under our ordinance, and maybe looking at some of those other provisions, if this is something that a relocation issue needs to do, then I think that's probably more appropriate to look at it on a case-by-case basis, as opposed to trying to do some more global systemic type of a change. I did want to point out, I just did a little research, because elevators are notoriously temperamental. And I know that what typically happens is a property owner has the service on call. So if an elevator is out, typically they'll bring somebody in within a day and get that elevator back up and running. I know that's what happens in my building. And I just looked back to see we've had this issue come up twice. And so I think there's a there's a sense that maybe this comes up more often than it does. And so I just wanted to look back and see how often this has come before the commission or come up as a rent adjustment process. And it's only come up 4 times since 2008. So I think it's something that I think Commissioner Topshin, I think that's well taken as far as giving some of the tenants more information about how to contact code compliance if they're not getting the service from the manager, from the elevator service that they should have, and then maybe start that process a little sooner so that they're aware that there's something that there's someone in the city they can reach out to. That would be my suggestion.
I actually have a question for Commissioner O'Keefe. Since you brought this forward, it sounds as if the commission agrees that the current process is lacking in many ways. And unfortunately, we do not generally have the ability to write a new ordinance or amend an ordinance. And hearing from legal counsel, it may not be, this may not be a situation that is best heard during our appeals. But I would be in favor of our drafting, and I don't know the legal term, but some kind of a memorandum to City Council sort of summarizing why this was brought before, why you brought this before our commission, summarizing the concerns of the commission, and then kind of letting, saying that we are happy to take this on as a project, or if they want to assign that to staff, but kind of, I'd like this to go in detail to council to hear our thoughts and concerns, and then look to them as to how they would like to move forward, if at all, on that. What would be your feelings on that sort of a process from this evening's meeting?
Yeah, I think that could be a good idea. We've had some subcommittees before. Maybe we could have a few of us craft something based on what's been said here in a little more detail, and then come back to the commission. I know part of our purview is making recommendations about housing related to rent stabilization. So I think that certainly could be doable. I do have a handful of other specific questions I want to ask you. Maybe I should have done it all at first. So I wanted to give everybody a chance.
Go right ahead.
Okay. First, I'm curious from Mr. Rivas. If you're still, you might have left. Oh yeah, there you are. There's too many people. Do you know, and I know you don't have records specifically for elevators, like as a box you check, but do you have a sense of how many administrative citations you guys have given out for this? Is this something that comes up often or has come up more than once?
I don't have that information handy right now, but it typically, when it rises to the point where an administrative citation is going to be issued, especially as it relates to an elevator that is elevated to a supervisor, and then that is discussed with me. So, I can only speak from the time that I've been with the city of West Hollywood, which is now going around 20 months, so not even 2 years. But in that time frame, I can say that I've been aware of at least 2 instances where we have had to issue an administrative citation, but that's not to say that there weren't more.
And how much time elapses between when a person comes to complain about the elevator and they get a citation roughly? Is this like days, months, weeks?
Yeah, I mean, it varies. And that varies just across the board in terms of whatever case. I mean, it really depends on how cooperative the folks are with us when we're making contact with them. I mean, if we're not getting any sort of communication at all, then we can go relatively quickly through that process. And it all depends on what the situation is. So for a broken elevator, if we issue a warning notice, and more than likely we have some sort of contact information on hand for the property manager or even for the landlord. So the code enforcement officer will, send an email, will contact them by phone, in addition to issuing a warning notice and letting them know, hey, you need to get this started in terms of getting somebody out as quickly as possible, giving them at least 72 hours to make that happen. But if the property manager were to call and contact the code enforcement officer and say, hey, I called this company, or I called this other company, and right now they're just slammed with different things. Here's their information. I just want you to know that we've made contact. And the officer would give them a couple of more days, right, to make that happen. So the goal is, as long as that communication is steady and they are making a genuine effort in that, then we could give them additional time versus not. So it's hard for me to answer that question and tell you it's 3 days, a week, 2 weeks, et cetera.
And what is the penalty?
In terms of the citation? Yeah, so once we get to that point, then the first administrative citation would be a $200 fine plus a $50 administrative fee. So that's the first citation. And we do have a progressive fine schedule for our administrative citations. So if we had to issue a second citation, then that would rise to $400 with a $50 fee. And then the third citation would be $800 with a $50 administrative fee.
So the fees are the same as very minor things that people might do, like yielding at a stop sign when they're riding a bike. I know these repairs cost tens of thousands of dollars sometimes, so that seems like that might be just a very mild cost in comparison to the repair cost and not a very big deterrent. Ms. Regan, I know that it was mentioned that there's the possibility of going for an injunction if they don't respond to this. And there's criminal penalties possible for removing parking. Is criminal penalties possible for willful refusal to fix an elevator too, or no? I think you're muted.
I am, thanks. Any violation of the ordinance can be prosecuted as a misdemeanor.
Okay.
So that is a route.
There may be one other route. I did do a little bit of research and I wanted to confirm elevators are required under the Fair Housing Act. And so that could also be another possible route through a fair housing complaint with the Department of Justice.
Okay. Well, my concern is it doesn't sound like any of these are very rapid. You know, as long as we're not going to hear a case unless it's been broken for months at a time, probably. You know, you have to give notice, then there's 30 days, and then eventually it gets to us. So the fact that we've heard any actually suggests there's very serious problems for some. Obviously, we've seen it for some disabled residents. And I'm just concerned that there might not be anything that's really an adequate motivation to quickly remedy it if the penalty is only $200, which is so much less than what it costs to make these repairs quickly. And eventually there could be an injunction or a rental reduction. Is there any legal reason that the citations can't be much higher or based on, the harm done? Could we impose $10,000 or something for a willful failure to remedy an elevator or something like that?
And Commissioner O'Keefe, actually, I was just checking right now because I know we went through as we adopted our new vacant property ordinance, and we created a new neighborhood preservation chapter in our municipal code, and this specific broken elevator code section falls within that same chapter. And so I was incorrect in terms of the administrative citation as I was looking at the fee schedule. So we did update that. So the first citation is actually $1,000. So it's $1,000 with a $50 administrative fee. So the $50 administrative fee is applied to all of our administrative citations. And so the progressive fine schedule would be $1,000, $2,000, and $5,000.
Okay, it's still unfortunately less than it costs to repair an elevator in many cases. So, I mean, that's a concern.
And to answer your question in terms of what fine schedule is set, it's really recommendations that we make as we're making amendments or even changes to code sections in our West Hollywood Municipal Code, or if we have a change in circumstance, or maybe there's a priority issue or violation. I mean, I'll use our short-term rentals, even though it's completely separate than this, as an example where at that point there was very high administrative citations and even a formula that was created. And so that was presented to City Council and was adopted. So there is the ability to recommend changes to City Council, but that of course needs to go through the public hearing process and then get adopted at that point.
Mm-hmm. So on what we were speaking about before, this is from Ms. Regan again, about whether or not the landlord could be required to pay for a person to be housed somewhere else if they would essentially, I forget the specific ordinance in the language, but I think that's in our city ordinance, correct? And if so, could it just be amended to specifically say that this counts, that if a person is disabled and can't access their housing due to a willful failure to promptly fix elevator, the landlord discounts. Is there any legal reason that can't be done?
As I sit here today, I can't think of one. So it would certainly be something we could look into.
Okay. Well, if the commission agrees, I think that's something we might be able to explore changing at the city, something that's in our purview. I think it would still have to be approved by council, but I think that's definitely worth considering. Let's see.
Could you repeat that one more time, Commissioner O'Keefe? I just missed that last line. What is it that we would possibly be? I missed the question too.
Specifically saying that, and I wish I had the language in front of me, but the section of the city ordinance that says that a person, whose housing is uninhabitable because the landlord hasn't done repairs, that if their elevator is broken, the landlord has willfully failed to fix it, that counts, or maybe even not the willful failure, but that counts, so that they have to be housed somewhere else if they're disabled and cannot access their apartment as a consequence of that.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I think I had a couple more, but I would have to look at my notes. So if anybody else has questions, you could go ahead.
So just to tag on that last one, why would it need to, Commissioner O'Keefe, why would it need to be willful? What if the case were to be that, a landlord may be trying to repair an elevator, but it's a 1890s elevator, first one in West Hollywood, taking long to get parts, and there's someone who is disabled who is going to be without an elevator for 3 months. So it's not willful, but that person is being denied really access to anything except the interior of their apartment. So would you consider instances where it may not be willful, but certainly beyond the tenant's control to be losing that service of the elevator?
Personally, I'd love to see the city pay for it in that case, because I just think of small or landlords that might not have big margins and how much it could add up to. But I think somebody should cover it, that it shouldn't be that the financial penalty is on the resident. I think for sure the landlord should if it's due to their willful failure. And if it's not, either the landlord or the city should, in my opinion.
Commissioner Maggio?
Yes, my concern, of course, if you're waiting for a part for an elevator, then you have to wait for the part. There's nothing anyone could do about it. So my main concern is for a handicapped person living in an apartment, how do we help that handicapped person? How do we bring in social services, maybe to help them shop, or bring them what they may need to survive for a week or 2 weeks? I think we have to look at it that way. Because again, if you're waiting for a part, it could take weeks, and it isn't the fault of the owner, and it isn't the fault of the tenant.
Commissioner Mark?
I think Commissioner Maggio makes a very good point here, that I agree with Ms. Regan that we can't be punitive in our decisions and using the rent reductions as a punitive measure. I do think that there is a discussion to be had over the long term about our rent reduction numbers, and that some may be out of skew to the value that they provide or not to the tenant. So I think there's still a discussion about whether whatever the rent reduction is for an elevator may be too low when you put it in comparison to gardening or lights or street sweeping or whatever the case may be. But that's separate. I think what Commissioner Maggio brings to the table is we don't even need to necessarily get there if we look at alternative solutions to the problem. And while I would hope that our landlords are doing proactive maintenance and getting these parts before the problems come, that's not always the reality. So I think that's a good discussion to be had by the commission and by the city council to consider, how do we help people when they're sitting in their units for 3 weeks, 4 weeks. So Mr. Maggio, that was a wonderful idea.
And if the commission would like, I can ask our social services team to provide information in an email to the commission on the services that are available. I am familiar with a couple of them, but I'm not as expertly familiar with them to provide that information to you now. But there's at least 2 different services that can provide items for people, and then one service I believe that can help people get out of their building when they do have a challenge like a broken elevator.
Mr. Kirpies?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of go back. I think that this discussion, this conversation is really good and really important. And the topics we're talking about the code compliance issues are important. But personally, for me, I'm more interested in, especially within the scope of the Rent Stabilization Commission and the ordinance, I'm very interested in the reduction in the housing service. And like as I mentioned earlier, reducing from 30 days to 10 or whatever. But I wanted to just ask Ms. Regan if, so my intentions for saying this are not to be punitive. It is really to compensate the tenants for any lack of or any reduction in service. Was what I said earlier an example of the punitive, or did you just happen to follow me after talking? Because I really do intend it to be, my intentions for what I was saying was to really be compensation for the lack of the service, not necessarily to punish the landlord.
No, I think it depends on the goal. So I think it's a couple of things. No, I think the punitive was referring to raising the cost or the amount of the rent decrease. But as far as shortening the time for the process for this issue, if that is designed to try to get the service back sooner, I don't see how that could work in the context of this process. We haven't ever singled out a particular service for special treatment, and I don't know that would follow, regular kind of due process requirements. And I would just say again, if we're talking about a case where someone is disabled and relying on the elevator, then a different process is going to be effective. That's not what the rent reduction process is for. So if this is a genuine life safety issue, then we need to rely on other tools, I think was my point.
Yeah, so just to clarify my point, I'm not setting all the code enforcement and health safety issues aside. Just me speaking as a individual person, I value the service of a elevator more than I value, missing the gardener, as was given an example earlier. So that's all my intention was. I'm not saying to punish or to, I don't even know what the current rate is for what the service or the value of a service for or the reduction in service of an elevator is what we currently have. I mean, I don't know if there's anything wrong with the dollar value we have on it. My problem is that, it's a substantial decrease in service if you're out in an elevator versus your lawn isn't mowed. That was my point. And it's not meant to be punitive, although I could see it easily being, looked at that way. And probably many landlords would look at it that way. But it really would be my intention would be that it be so the tenant is not paying full rent when they don't get all their services. But if we can't I understand the point about individualizing it and separating it out from other services. That is probably a legal question that would be hard to get around. So I understand that.
So I think, I believe it's still in our bylaws that one thing that council has authorized we have authority over is to promulgate housing policy. This sounds like an issue that goes beyond the scope of what might be under a rent reduction through an appeal process. So I'm wondering, Commissioner O'Keefe, if you would like to kind of volunteering you to form and I know there's two, we have subcommittees and we have another group, and I forget what it's called, but to have a group perhaps of 3 commissioners to further flesh out this as a housing policy and then re-agendize that back for a future commission meeting before we would send that on to council. How would you feel about that?
I just want to remind the commission that the council removed housing policy from your purview, that the purview is specific to rent stabilization.
So I think I guess I should look at what exactly it is, but I think the broken elevator in rent stabilized housing is within our purview, right? So we could still do the subcommission for that purpose, correct?
I think that that's closer to the purview, correct, especially if you were going to frame it in relation to rent stabilization.
Okay. If before we get to the possible commission, I have one other question that I was wanting to ask that I forgot to. And I mentioned at the beginning that I was wondering about how the historic preservation laws might interact with this. I think it was brought up in one or two of the cases that we had. And I'm wondering if it's ever the case that people are required to repair old elevators rather than getting new ones because of housing preservation laws, or if otherwise there might be, an impediment to actually having the elevators be working because of historic preservation rules at the city or state level, and if so, is it the city or the state level?
Thank you, Commissioner O'Keefe. I don't know whether or not it's state or local level as it relates to that. What I can tell you is that there definitely isn't anything that prevents whether a building is designated as historic from them making repairs. However, anytime that somebody is going to be making new additions or replacements to what is already existing, then yes, then they would need to come in to our planning division and get a certificate of appropriateness and ultimately get their approval through that process. But that would not prevent them in any way, shape, or form from providing repairs on existing elevators.
But they might not be able to replace it with a newer, better one, or they might have to delay it because they'd have to get that approval, correct? They couldn't just go do whatever's best for access without having this added step.
That is correct, yeah. So if you had an existing historic building and they wanted to completely replace the elevator unit, then as a part of their plan approval and building permit process, that would be flushed out, and the historic preservation and the certificate of appropriateness, as I mentioned, would be a part of that process.
Commissioner Maggio?
Yes, to the manager, are you saying that it is not in our purview to find a solution for a tenant who might be handicapped in a building who is being inconvenienced by a broken down elevator?
I think it's a very important issue and one that we need to address as a city. When I look at your duties specifically within the code, I do not see that as included within rent stabilization. However, I think that the conversation that the commission's had this evening is very meaningful. The idea of broken elevators I could see fitting better within the Disabilities Advisory Board or the Human Services Commission, certainly the council itself. Perhaps if the commission is receptive, I've been taking some notes this evening. I would like to provide you with some more information on the social services that are available and how the city approaches and helps and supports someone who is not able to leave their unit because of a broken elevator. And then from there, hear your thoughts because perhaps what the commission could do would be to form, as you mentioned, a letter of concern, let's call it that the commission could then forward either to one of those other advisory bodies or through your liaison, or that you could forward to the city council itself.
Could we just recommend to the Human Services to look into the issue of helping handicap in regard to this issue of elevators? Would that maybe be a way to move on it more quickly since it's not in our purview?
Well, this could be part of a letter, right? We could include that and everything else in a letter. Is that right, Mr. Noonan? Do you think?
I think that that would be fine. And then if the commission did want to relook at your valuation guide, which the commission has considered, but I think the commission also tonight recognized that that's a longer term approach, that there's a shorter term need. But certainly reevaluating your valuation guide would be something within your purview.
Okay, so would we have like a subcommittee write the letter and come back, or just people, less than 4 people could let me know informally and we could write it?
Mr. Noonan, were you suggesting that you might draft that letter, the comments from you and bring that back to the commission?
Likes, I'm happy to draft something and we can share that with you if and see what your feelings on it.
Commissioner Thompson, did you
Can we ask that you work with? I'm sorry.
Just thank you, Chair. I just wanted to mention that the valuation guidelines, as Peter already noticed, that so we should revisit that, because I don't remember what was the last time we revisited the guidelines, and what is the mechanism of increasing it without being punitive, of course, Ms. Regan, but it's still a mechanism that is currently effective, it's working. And we're talking about reasonable reduction for those cases. And I think maybe having a discussion, not us having a discussion with the, maybe staff may have a discussion with the hearing examiners, you know, kind of emphasizing the importance of this service, the elevator services for the residents in West Hollywood, and how important that the commission looks into these things. And because sometimes we've seen that those rent reductions are not reasonable. We don't want to be punitive, but the cases that sometimes we review, we see the rent reductions are not reasonable. They're very low, at the low end. I know there's a range, I don't remember the numbers, but we want to make sure that the hearing examiners, they know how sensitive this is and how important this is for the city. So I would definitely suggest, and thank you, Manager Noonan, for mentioning that, to include the discussion on the guidelines and to see what we can do, what is within our purview to change the guidelines, but not to be punitive, again, just to mention that. And also, just as a comment, I know that we use the word relocation a couple of times, but for the viewers and for people who can hear us now, so we're not talking about permanent relocation. So this is a relocation temporarily to a motel or hotel room for the time that the owner has to fix things. But that's not the permanent relocation, of course, by, you know, I just thought that I should mention that. And Manager Rivas, if you are there, how many code compliance inspectors we have in the city currently?
So we currently have 5 code enforcement officers and 1 code enforcement technician. In addition to that, we have 2 senior code enforcement officers as well. But we did have a retirement recently from one of our code enforcement officers. And we also have 2 other staff members out in the field that are currently working remotely and administratively. So that is our field staff right now. So essentially, I'd say we have 6 right now.
6, and those are the inspectors who can issue citations. Others may not issue citations, right? Only inspector can issue a citation?
So all of our code enforcement officers can issue citations,
okay.
As well as our seniors, our supervisors, and myself. But of course, the staff that are out in the fields are the ones that are responding to the calls for service and requests that come in.
Yeah, and I'd like to ask Manager Noonan to, you know, if it's possible to include in your report or your letter, how many buildings we have currently with the elevator services, to see if the number of inspectors we have now, they can really cover the inspections if it's needed, let's say to do some sort of a proactive inspections of the elevators or whatever the policy would be sometime in the near future. So if that would be adequate to cover the number of elevators we have in the building, if we decide that we're gonna just inspect each and every elevator in the city to see what's going on there. So these are my comments. Thank you, Chair.
I would just tag on, as much as I would appreciate the chance to discuss perhaps a review of the rental reduction schedule, I would leave that as a separate issue from this particular elevator issue in Mr. Noonan's current report. Commissioner Kirby, did you have your hand up a second ago? Did you want to? No? Commissioner O'Keefe, yes.
Yeah, so in addition to the letter that Mr. Noonan's going to create, the one thing that was under our purview was the possibility of temporary relocation. And I think Commissioner Maggio had a great point that there's a lot of people that, they would prefer to stay in their home and have services to help them out. But for those people, it's during COVID time, so not many people are going to work now, but that won't last forever. So people who are disabled who need to come and go, I do think it's worth maybe agendizing if Ms. Regan can write up draft changes to that provision of the ordinance, and we could consider that later.
Well, I would suggest we'll bring it back and I'll look into the feasibility of something like that.
Great.
Commissioner Maggio?
Yes, I just would like to make one last point that I know what it's like to experience helping a group of people helping a handicapped individual down several floors of steps. And it's so uncomfortable for everyone. And it's something that we really should look into with Human Services. And maybe this could be an opportunity to discuss many of these issues that no longer are totally in our purview by perhaps having a joint meeting with Human Services, because that would help, I think, to iron out a lot of these problems. Thank you.
So Mr. Noonan, if you could be willing to take on the task of sort of summarizing our thoughts from this evening and adding any suggestions, I'm wondering, would it be pushing the envelope to ask for that to come back at our next commission? I'm only just a bit concerned that I think there's going to be some changes on the commission. I'd like the people sitting before us to have the opportunity to hear that summary and perhaps take some kind of action upon that.
Your next meeting does have 2 appeals already, and so it would be easier to place that on the agenda for the meeting after that, which would be the January 28th meeting, I believe.
Commissioners, any further questions or comments at this point? Okay. Commissioner O'Keefe?
I just wanted to thank Mr. Rivas for coming in. I know he's worked very, very hard during COVID with all the extra stuff I'm sure our city has put in it, and I really appreciate all your answers and everything you do for the city and spending the evening with us. And of course, all the staff that's already with us every time we have a meeting as well.
Danny, I also appreciate your time. I'd wish you a safe drive home, but I believe your commute will be just a few feet this evening. But thank you for coming in and sharing the meeting with us this evening.
You got it. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, commissioners, for the opportunity to be here. And yeah, if there's anything that we can do, and this certainly was a very important conversation. So whatever code compliance can do to help and assist in that effort, we're definitely here. And so all of you have a great happy holidays and a new year.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So it is 8:18. I don't know if my commissioners would like to take maybe a 3-minute break before we move on to item 10A, or if you want to just power through and continue the meeting.
1 minute break.
3
minutes.
3 minutes.
3-minute break. So it's 8:18 by my clock. We will resume at 8:21. Just waiting for Vice Chair Topchin and Commissioner O'Keefe will resume the meeting. There we go. So it is 8:22 and we can resume the meeting. With that, we'll go to item 10A, information on the rent stabilization ordinance deposit interest formula.
Good evening. Thank you so much. So for this item, I would like to introduce Yasmin Spiteri, one of our information coordinators and the writer of this report. And Yasmin is going to present the report for the commission.
Thanks, Pete. And good evening, commissioners, chair, vice chair. So every year, the rent stabilization staff calculates the interest to be paid on security deposits held by tenants according to the formula that's outlined in the West Hollywood rent regulations. And those regulations require that the interest rate be calculated by averaging the July 1 of that calendar year, the rates for regular savings accounts or passbook savings accounts at 5 West Hollywood banks, or banks that have brick and mortar branches in the city of West Hollywood, and rounding to the nearest 0.25%. So staff reviewed the interest rates of 5 banks with locations in the city and found the average rate to be 0.024%. And that rounds to the nearest 0.25% to be a rate of 0%. Therefore, pursuant to our rent regulations, the security deposit interest due from landlords to tenants for their security deposits held in the calendar year of 2020 is 0%. We reviewed the security deposit interest rate since 1985, and a copy of that review was provided in attachment A of the report. You can see the rates for every year through 1985. And for several years now, that security deposit interest rate calculation has resulted in 0% interest paid for those security deposits held by tenants. I understand that a commissioner expressed interest in exploring the feasibility of adjusting the formula, considering that today there's many more online options for banking as well as other options available to West Hollywood residents that might not have a brick and mortar location in the city. And so that perhaps we would amend the security deposit formula to reflect that. The last time the security deposit interest rate formula was changed was in 2002, and that was when the rent regulations were amended to reflect the formula that is used today for all rent stabilized units. We went ahead and reviewed 5 FDIC insured online savings accounts providers, and we used Capital One, which had an account that had 0.40 interest rate. Barclays had 0.45%. American Express had an account for 0.60%. Discover 0.5%, and Axos had 0.61%. And the average of all that being a rate of 0.512%. Rounding that to the nearest 0.25% resulted in a rate of 0.5%, or 0.50. So some next steps here are that since some banking institutions outside of the city of West Hollywood appear to be offering those higher interest rates on savings accounts than those with branches located within the city, if the commission desires, staff can explore the feasibility of a revision to that formula to calculate the security deposit interest rate in order to reference those rates paid at institutions outside of the city. And with that, it's a short report. So with that, I conclude my report summary and open it up for questions. Thank you.
Commissioner Kirby, since this was an issue that's been near and dear to your heart, brought this forward, would you like to begin the discussion?
Sure, I have a couple of questions first. Just, I guess the question I have is, when I was looking into other cities, we seem to be the only one that averages to the, or what do you call it, rounds to the nearest quarter. Some cities, the other cities seem to round to the 10th. Do you know the history of that? I know we also round to the quarter, I believe, with our rent adjustment or our annual rental adjustment as well. But do you know if there's any story of the history of that, how that was selected?
I don't know if legal counsel would have a history of that. I've always assumed that it was just for ease of calculation.
It probably was, yeah. I just want to make sure there wasn't any specific reason why we went that route. The other question I had was, and maybe you don't know the answer to this, but have you given at least some preliminary thought on how that might be shaped if we did look outside of West Hollywood? I mean, there are hundreds of banks. I tried to look for FDIC or the Federal Reserve. They used to do a report annually, which Berkeley based theirs on for several years, but that ended about in 2014, I believe. So how would we, if the commission wanted to go down that route and look at other banks, where do we put the limit and how do we? And if we don't know the answer, that's fine. That's something we could explore later. But I'm just curious if any thought has been put into that.
That's what we need to find, Commissioner. You hit the nail on the head. If the commission would like to go forward, and we would need to find some measure that we could use. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, those are my questions. Do you want me to go right into what I was going to talk about, Chair? Or
Sure.
Okay. I think that thank you, first of all, for this report. This report is very good, very thorough, and basically was more than what I was even looking for. So thank you. I appreciate it a lot. The concern I've always had is that we have, traditional banks here in West Hollywood that are the brick and mortar, which are commercial banks that are just basically there to make money off of us, individuals. They're not there to build wealth for us. So why do we need to limit ourselves to those banks? Because anyone who wants to, we hand over our money for a deposit. Granted, we can't use it, and we were putting there for security. But it's our money, so we should be able to have some sort of say on investing that money. So that's why I brought this up, is because I know that I make triple at least interest rate than zero is what we get. So right now, so I make lots more than that. But I think that if we are going to look at other options and expand it, we would want to limit it, obviously, to FDIC insured banks. I mentioned just a moment ago about the Federal Reserve doing the report. They no longer do that, but the FDIC does do a weekly average of all interest rates of all FDIC insured accounts. It would be labor intensive for staff to have to keep track of weekly and then do an average over the year if the FDIC doesn't do that, because I don't know if they do that, but they do it weekly. Berkeley does I believe it's Berkeley, does a average per month of the interest rates. So every first day of the month, there's a staff member somewhere keeping track of the average of their 5 or 6 banks that they use in Berkeley. They've also kind of pulled away from, I think their numbers still use their local banks, but they pulled away from making their landlords deposit the money in those banks. And like our city, we don't require any restrictions on where the landlords deposit their money, and I don't think we should. So that's kind of why I brought this up, and hopefully that others can agree that we could look at other options to maximize the opportunities for our residents to earn as much interest as they can on the money that they're putting aside for security deposits.
Commissioner Charity?
Thank you.
I was just nodding in agreement. I wasn't looking to speak.
Okay. Commissioner Martz?
No comments on this.
Commissioner Maggio?
Yes, I noticed that we have not had any money owed to the tenant for 9 years. That's a long period of time. The question I have we ever looked into the credit unions and their rates? And if we could coordinate with that or them? That's to the staff member.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, if the commission was interested in staff exploring these alternatives, we would look at credit unions. What we would need to do, I think Commissioner Kirby's phrased very eloquently, is we would need to find a means of describing the alternative to using our local banks, is define some sort of a measure that we would look to in order to calculate that interest. And we could certainly roll credit unions into that or other institutions. It's just, it's going to be a challenge in crafting the language in a way that we can use as the formula that's in the rent regulations.
Commissioner O'Keefe?
Just wanted to thank Commissioner Kirby for bringing this item and to staff for bringing the report. I agree that if there's a way to do it, we certainly should provide more return on people's security deposits. I myself get a lot more interest than 0%, so I see no reason that the landlords couldn't also deposit it somewhere that gets more interest.
Vice Chair Topchin?
Yes, thank you. I just want to thank Yasmin first for this very informative report. It was very interesting to read and see the data, and also Commissioner Kirby for suggesting to bring this for discussion. And yeah, I like the idea of exploring more and checking the other banks, other rates for the banks outside this city. And to see if other cities have other mechanism of doing this. And Commissioner Kirby mentioned Berkeley. I also would like to see Santa Monica, City of Los Angeles, the banks that they are using. And I think this is important to explore and improve if there is an area that we can improve, obviously. That would be interesting to see that. Thank you. A question for staff.
Vice Chair Topchin, can you move closer to your microphone, please?
Oh, sorry, yeah. The question for staff, this is, I mean, we have 0%, but we still have to notify the owners and the tenants, right? What is the notification method? Are you sending letters, or how are you guys doing it annually?
Go ahead, Yasmin, please.
Yeah. We send a winter newsletter, and it goes out to all tenants and landlords in the rent stabilization program, and they receive notice that way via mail.
Okay, so the newsletter, yeah, which I sent, but there is no specific letter sending to the residents. That's fine. And the newsletter is translated into Spanish and Russian. Can you remind me again? Because I receive in English.
Yes, it includes an insert with a Spanish and Russian translation.
Oh, okay. The insert is all right. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Kirby?
Yeah, so if it's all right, there are a couple things. If the commission is interested, if we could give some, ask staff to take a look at this, and if I could offer a couple parameters to consider while doing that, would the commission agree? Or I mean, I can list off the parameters when I'm talking about. I don't think they'll be controversial. But one of them would be obviously stay within FDIC insured banks. We currently, I believe, base it on a 6-month certificate of deposit CD. Now that we have now made the city to where we require 1-year leases, if we could also not focus on 1 year, because I know that the interest rates change all the time, and sometimes this 3-month or 6-month is a better interest rate than 1 year, which amazes me sometimes. But if we could also look at 6-month and 1 year CDs rates, and in addition to the passbook rates, I believe we use the savings passbook rates right now. And the other item was, and we would look at the 6-month and 1 year, and possibly even incorporate that into the ordinance, that the greater of the 6-month or the 1 year. That's something to think about. And then looking at the FDIC, I don't know if it's a corporation, insurance company, government agency, what it is exactly, but it's a what their weekly or what reports they offer that we might be able to base our formula on. And the final thing, I believe, was maybe that was it. Maybe those are the only great ideas. And to answer the question about what Los Angeles does, Los Angeles actually has a set percentage. I'm not quite sure how they come up with the percentage each year. They have a formula too. Maybe Peter knows the answer to that, but they have a set percentage, or what the landlord actually made off of the. They can provide a bank statement if it's less than the city's set amount, and there's all the cities actually that have this, that have security deposits. All of them are something this year. They might not be much higher than 0%, but they are something. We're the only ones that I could find that offers security deposits that didn't have a return. Santa Monica does not offer security deposits. I believe it was them who got sued in that year that we took the break from doing it, and the cities reconfigured how they did it. And Santa Monica has reviewed it at least once since then, and have opted not to reinstate their safety deposit program. And if anyone else has any other ideas, I know it's not a lot of direction, but.
I have a few concerns, and perhaps one of them is just semantics, Mr. Kerpes, but you mentioned that you felt that we should have a say in how that money is invested. Security deposits are not, from a landlord's perspective, an investment. It is money that we hold temporarily that would be released upon a tenancy ending, minus any damages to an apartment. So I know for myself, and I don't know of any landlord, that we invest this money. This money must be kept liquid so that as a tenant moves out, we can access that. So I certainly am unable to take my security deposit money and tie that up into a 1-year CD with a higher interest. I keep that money liquid. It earns, Yiddish, it earns bupkis on bupkis. It means it earns very little interest in the accounts. And also there are many factors on how as a businessman, how I choose where to bank. So interest rate certainly is a factor, but for me, it is multiple factors on where I choose to do my banking. So I'm just a little hesitant about any discussion of treating a security deposit as an investment vehicle for either party. And I would be concerned about penalizing a landlord who is, like myself, unable to lock that money into a longer term savings vehicle, and saying that you must pay out more than what you are getting, because you don't do so. So I certainly understand that, banking options have changed, dramatically in the last 10 to 15 years. There are far more options, but I'm cautious about basically telling landlords, if you do not hold that money in this manner, you will have to pay it anyway. So I'm not opposed to looking at some online interest rates, as you said, under FDIC approved financial institutions. I would be cautious about including interest rates on longer term investments. I would rather stay on basically what we used to call a passbook account, where the money is liquid and available at all times. Those would be my comments. Commissioners, any comment?
Chair?
Commissioner Maggio.
Yes, would you go so far as to maybe considering eliminating any interest on any rent held? I mean, considering no interest has been paid in 9 years, maybe it's something that really doesn't need to be done.
I think that the nature of the financial markets changes so rapidly. There are years where you do get a decent interest rate on whatever money you hold, even in a passbook account. I would be hesitant to completely eliminate the possibility of an interest return on a tenant. So I would not be in favor of that. Commissioner,
I think the only way you get any interest are with dividends and stocks. That's where you get your dividend or your interest, but has not existed in a long time and may not in a long time.
Commissioner Kerpes?
Well, first of all, it does exist, but it doesn't exist under our formula, because our formula requires that it be to the quarter percentile. As I mentioned, all other cities that offer a security deposit are not zero this year. Granted, they're low, and to talk about or to address your point, Chair Bergstein, remember when I'm talking about these interest rates, there is no requirement for the landlord, just as there isn't now, to invest it in any certain way. They're quite free in what they can do with the money, with few restrictions. And so remember, you're thinking of the high interest rates, high meaning 0.05, whatever. But for this conversation, high interest rate, remember, we're going to be taking an average of that. So all landlords will have an option of falling under that, falling above that. We're taking an average. So it's a good, a fair range of what should be able to be made off that money, because landlords are, even though it's only pennies or dollars a year, they are making money off of that when we have a 0% return to the tenant. It is not the landlord's money. It's there for security purposes. I do understand your point, and I think there's ways around it, but that will be one of the things that I would hope staff would look into, as well as what the implications are of using 1 year certificate rates, and what the resolution would be to that. If we used those rates and money needed to be taken out prior to that, what is that? That's usually a 3 month, if you have a CD, it's usually a 3 month penalty of interest. So there becomes a certain point where you're still coming out ahead, because again, the tenant's only going to get, probably from our formula, it's always going to stay the average of whatever numbers we use. So I think that's just, I agree. So we need to look into that to find out we don't want the landlord to be paying money for this either. It's supposed to be a wash.
Would you be in favor? You mentioned, I think it was Los Angeles, where a landlord can prove up by showing essentially a bank statement that says, this is the interest that I made on my account. Would you be in favor of that avenue as well?
Thank you for bringing that up, because that was actually my other point. Yes, I would be, or I'd want staff to consider that, because that would be really a lot of staff time having to accept those documents, process those documents. So that would be hopefully what staff would review. And and as well, I think Commissioner Maggio had mentioned earlier, or somebody did, about having, I don't know, there was another idea that was mentioned that could potentially be very staff intensive, to where we want to avoid, overdoing it with staff and making the process too complicated for people to participate in.
Commissioner O'Keefe.
I would not support tying it to a CD because it has to be liquid. If a person moves out in the middle of the year, they have to be given their security deposit back. But I certainly support having interest, perhaps having it to the nearest 0.1% instead of 0.25%, and looking at online banking as well.
Commissioner Kirby, since you initially brought this, how would you like to see this move forward from this meeting?
Can we just do a consensus that we would like staff to look into this based upon some of the comments that we've made this evening?
Could you just flesh out which, just to give it a little bit more direction, that's a little open-ended. Do you want to include?
So look into what options we have for adjusting the formula for how the city determines the interest savings or the interest rate for security deposits, and as they do that, to remain focused on FDIC insured accounts, expand the review of how we might go beyond the 5 brick and mortar banks in our city and look at online banking. I apologize, this is the new one, but this just also came up in my notes, is we would also want to make sure that there's not a minimum, too high of a minimum requirement for these interest rate accounts. So, looking at about $1,000 account. So there might be an account that requires $1,000 for you to get this interest rate, but not going beyond $1,000, because some accounts are $25,000, $10,000, $5,000, etc. And then to also look at not only the 6 month, but in comparison, just to give us an idea, the 6 month and the 1 month, or 6 month and 1 year CD options, even though we may not go that route because it ties up the money or penalizes the property owner.
Ms. Regan, you have some comments?
I think I can simplify this a little. There is a recommendation in the staff report for the staff to, since the commission is going that way, for the staff to explore the feasibility of adjusting the security deposit interest formula. And we will explore that issue consistent with the comments that we've received tonight. So if you want to adopt that recommendation, we will certainly look back at this meeting and make sure that that we're doing that in taking into account Commissioner Kirby's comments.
I move we do that.
There a second?
Second.
Second. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Charity?
Aye.
Commissioner Kirby's?
Aye.
Commissioner Maggio?
Aye.
Commissioner Marks?
Aye.
Commissioner O'Keefe?
Aye.
Vice Chair Topshin?
Aye.
Chair Bergstein?
Aye. Motion passes. So we'll look forward to a date uncertain when staff will come back with a further report on this issue.
And thank you again, everybody, for that report.
With that, we'll go to item 11, unfinished business, election of chair. So I think I should probably begin this by formally on the record saying that I'm stepping aside in my role as chair of this commission. Just a couple thank yous. First and foremost, to our incredible staff. This term has been challenging because of the pandemic, and I just need to recognize the diligence and the work in getting us back up and running in a virtual setting, working through the many technological issues, working with the parties on appeal, because it can be just a little cumbersome, making sure that they feel heard and a part of the process. So I really can't say enough about staff. I know that, Peter, I probably nudged you a little bit starting back in May. I contacted you and our city manager saying that there is so much going on with our tenancies at the time during the pandemic. I really was pushing to bring back our meetings in a virtual format. So I'm so pleased we were able to do that and appreciate all that you have done, you and your staff have done to make this happen. I want to thank my fellow commissioners, not only for honoring me with this service, but also for your patience and commitment as we segued into virtual. I look forward to someday when commission meetings are back in council chambers. I think that we have done an admirable job in discharging our duties, but it is different in the virtual setting. So thank you, staff, and thank you to my fellow commissioners. And with that, I will open up nominations for the position of chair. We begin at our first meeting in January of 2021, going through, Mr. Noonan, is it July? I forget when our bylaws said the next elections will be.
So question, this is for only 6-month period, is that correct?
It's for the balance of this term. And again, Mr. Noonan, that would run through, isn't it the first week in July, I think?
The first meeting in July. Yes, the reorganization typically happens on the first meeting in July.
Okay. And with that, I would like to nominate our very capable Vice Chair, Agassi Topchin.
Second.
And
You accept, Mr. Topchin?
I do accept that. Thank you.
Any further nominations? And I would vote to close nominations and have a roll call vote.
Commissioner Charity,
aye.
Commissioner Kirby,
Aye.
Commissioner Maggio,
Aye.
Commissioner Marks,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Keefe,
Aye.
Vice Chair Topchin,
Aye.
Chair Bergstein.
Aye. Congratulations, Chair Topchin. So at this point, we need to hold an election for the new vice chair. I'm not sure if I formally turn this over to our new chair, Topchin, and I step aside. What is the?
Yes, the new chair will now ask for nominations for vice chair.
That's correct.
Chair, I
Thank you.
turn this over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, commissioners. I'd like to open the nomination for the election of vice chair. And
I'd like
Sure.
to nominate Karen O'Keefe.
Commissioner O'Keefe, will you accept the nomination?
I will.
I will
Okay.
second
Other nominations?
I would second Commissioner O'Keefe's nomination, if that's
Okay, so
necessary.
we have a second, and since there are no other nominations, I will ask the secretary to begin the roll call, please.
Commissioner Charity,
Aye.
Commissioner Kirby,
Aye.
Commissioner Maggio,
Aye.
Commissioner Marks,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Keefe,
Aye.
Vice Chair Topchin,
Aye.
Chair Bergstein.
Aye.
Sorry.
Commissioner.
All right, so congratulations, Vice Chair O'Keefe. Next item is a public comment. Mr. Secretary, do we have any speakers lined up tonight?
Not at this time.
Not this time. Okay, moving on to the commission comments. I think this is the time where we can make our comments, and I personally, if I may, to begin, I want to thank former Chair Bergstein, Commissioner Bergstein, for your exceptional job as the commission's chair for the last year and a half. You've done an incredible, truly an incredible job, and especially moving from our normal meetings to these online virtual meetings with all the glitches and everything else. you held that in a way that we didn't really feel that there was any technical issues or anything else. So you've run a wonderful meetings, and thank you so much. I will definitely continue the present that you said, I truly enjoyed serving as your vice chair during this period. Thank you so much, and congratulations, Vice Chair O'Keefe. And I will definitely enjoy working with you closely. Commissioners, I'll begin with Commissioner Bergstein.
No comments this time. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Kerpis.
Sure. First of all, I want to say, well, congratulations, Chair, and thank you to Commissioner Bergstein, former Chair Bergstein. You were a fantastic chair before COVID, and you've virtually become the best chair ever since then. Virtually since the commission has been started. I appreciate the fact that you were very deliberate in always allowing everybody to speak, and it was even going beyond allowing everyone to speak, but actually encouraging everyone to participate in the discussions. The example just this evening when I think everyone had spoken on something, and Commissioner Charity hadn't spoken quite yet, and you made sure to go out of your way to make sure that all the commissioners had an opportunity to speak. So I really appreciate that, especially coming from someone who likes to be heard. The only other item I have is, obviously we know that the transmission of COVID-19 is extremely high. Our hospital beds are near full. I know that we're all taking the extra steps to stay inside and stay safe and wear our masks and keep our distance. But the governor did announce a statewide app that has been on, Google and Apple have been working on for quite a while. Other states have already been using it for several weeks, if not months. But California has now started to encourage folks to use the what they're calling the Cal Notify. It's an app. It's already on your iPhones. You just have to turn it on under your settings. And if you have an Android, you just have to download the application. It is completely anonymous. It does not track where you're going or anything like that. What it does is it speaks one cell phone, another cell phone that happens to be in contact with each other or near each other for a specified amount of time. It just exchanges a code. So it just memorizes that at one point, not where, but at one point, those two phones were together. It's not by name or anything like that. And then if the one of the individuals who voluntarily chooses to let the app know that they have tested positive, then the phone will automatically notify other people that were in contact with that cell phone, or other cell phones. It'll contact other cell phones that were in contact with that one for people who have opted into the program as well. So the app is most effective if lots of people participate, and it's just one extra safety measure that one can take. And I hope that people will consider doing that. And you can get more information at COVID19ca.gov, or go directly to canotify.gov or org. I'm not sure which one it is, but just like California Notify and you'll find it. Or just look in your phone. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. I should have done this in alphabetical order. Next would be Commissioner Charity.
Just wanted to say thank you for stepping up, Commissioner Bergstein, and leading us through what was a tough time technologically and otherwise. So thank you for being so diligent and so just comprehensive in getting us through these meetings on Zoom. It's definitely not easy. And congratulations, our new chair,
Thank you.
Chair Topshian, and congratulations, Vice Chair Oki.
Thank you. Commissioner Maggio, any comments?
I'd like to go after Commissioner Martz.
All right, so Commissioner Martz, please.
Yes, thank you. I would echo what Commissioner Kirby said on the signups for your cell phones. It used to be that he and I would piggyback on each other to do the census, and now we're going to piggyback on each other to say, sign up for these alerts. The numbers that came out today for Los Angeles County for COVID infections were astronomical, and as much as we can do any little thing to drive down those numbers, the quicker we'll be off of doing Zoom meetings and resuming these things in person. I also want to share that Commissioner O'Keefe and I are going to be doing a little event for the unhoused community. She has graciously offered to cook meals, and I am going to be the wheels to bring them to people out on the streets this Sunday. So I'll also be putting a little Christmas card in with each of the meals. So if anyone wants to donate or anything that way, feel free to, but that's a little fun event that I wouldn't have been able to do had I not been on this commission. And then most of you know, I don't know if everyone knows, but this is my last night on the commission. I have a replacement coming in for January, unfortunately earlier than I would have liked, but so be it. And I just want to thank every one of you for all the great times we've had together in person and on Zoom. The work that we do here is so important, especially with COVID hitting all of our tenants and our landlords' situations so deeply. Being able to provide the service to them virtually is very important. And I think continuing the functions of government and showing that we care and we're still here and we're still functioning despite the issues that face our nation is very important. And the work that we do to provide tenants and landlords with services, I think, are pretty unparalleled from this commission to a lot of the other cities that surround us and are in our state. So West Hollywood is a very special place. I hope to be back on another commissioner board in the near future, but I will get to enjoy my holidays. And thank you all for the great work you've done, and also to the staff as well. It's an unthanked job to come now at 9 p.m. on a Thursday evening and just sit and listen. So thank you to all the staff as well, both on helping our commission and all the commissions that we have in this great city. So thank you.
I muted myself. Commissioner Maggio.
Yes, I wanted Kalen to make his announcement first, but first I'd like to say to Rob, I think you did a wonderful job. As they say in Yiddish, it was a machaya. And I give you a lot of credit for leading us during this difficult period. To Kalen, it sounds silly to say I will miss you since we live in the same city, but I will miss you here on Rent Stabilization. As you know, I've been here for many years, and I think you have been one of the best commissioners we've had. I was looking forward for you to be chair one day, but who knows, maybe you will return knowing how resourceful you are. I would like to wish all my Jewish friends a happy Hanukkah. This is the first evening of Hanukkah. Happy Hanukkah. And to everyone else, a very happy holiday and a Merry Christmas and a very happy New Year. Looking forward to 2021 being a different type of year, a stellar year. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chair?
I wanted to thank Commissioner Martz for all of his service. Miss having you on the commission and hope maybe you'll be back again someday. Really excited to collaborate with you this weekend to feed some of our neighbors. And I'm excited to hear you have a Christmas card because I was feeling like that was a missing little piece. So good. And I want to echo all the praise for Commissioner Bergstein. I always appreciated your heartfelt motions of adjournment for people that I didn't know about, and the history you brought, and all of the guidance you gave to tenants after the hearing, bringing up different things. And you just have really made people feel heard and like the city's here to serve them. And I appreciate that. And congratulations to Vice Chair Topshin, and echoing the happy holidays and happy new year to everybody.
Thank you, Chair. I need to get used to not muting myself because Commissioner Bergstein was very strict about it. I keep muting myself, so I have to learn not to do that. I want to say thank you, Commissioner Martz, for your great service, for being such a short time for us to kind of know you, but explore you. But we from the very beginning, you demonstrated what a wonderful person you are and how much you care about the city. And you brought your knowledge and your background as an attorney to the cases. I think that was very valuable. And thank you for being who you are, very classy, very knowledgeable, very wonderful person. So hopefully we can see you around and that you will continue being active resident, and because our constituents need people like you. And thank you for that. And with that, I also want to say happy holidays to everyone. Happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas, happy holidays, happy New Year. Since this is our last meeting this year, I wish everyone, staff, commissioners, and our constituents, I wish that the next year will be safe and healthy and peaceful, and that this madness will be over next year, hopefully. So we've crossed our fingers and just hope for the best, obviously. With that, well, the next will be the staff comments. Anything from staff? Mr. Noonan?
Ms. Regan, did you have anything you'd like to say?
I just wanted to thank Commissioner Martz for your service and your expertise on some of these really sticky legal issues. It was really helpful to have your voice on the commission. And I want to thank Chair Bergstein for so expertly guiding us through these difficult and complicated times and these meetings that we've had virtually. It's been really a much smoother ride with you at the helm. So thank you.
Thank you. I would second those thoughts. I want to also say, Commissioner Martz, when you told me that you would be replaced, it took me a moment, and I had to just think and reflect on this commission. And I think that the commission that we have right now has really come into itself. And I think that there's a lot of great minds and great capacity and energy on this commission. And I just, thank you all for letting me be a part of this. I really appreciate it. I'm hoping you'll indulge me one thing. Now, this is in the spirit of Commissioner Maggio. He typically likes to take a photo at moments like this, and we have the capacity to do that. It's going to look a little like Hollywood Squares, but can I take a photo of us now? And judging by the smiles, I think that's a yes. So everybody, get ready on the count of 3. Okay. So 1, 2, 3. There we go. Thank you so much. I'll share that with everybody.
Thank you, Peter.
I love that actually with the sound.
Yeah, we missed that when the Richard Maggio used to take pictures all the time, right? We still have some of the pictures saved. Thank you, commissioners. So I think this is it. These are the items that we had at tonight's meeting. And the next is adjournment of the meeting. The next meeting of the Rent Stabilization Commission will be held at 7 p.m. on Thursday, January 14, 2021, via teleconference. So thank you and good night, everyone.
Thank
Night,
you.
happy holidays.
Everyone, stay
Happy
safe.
holidays.
Holidays.
Yeah, stay safe.
Stay safe, healthy.